Welcome to the Permanent Beta Podcast, business essentials for small to mid-sized organizational leaders. We are beyond thrilled to have Louise Senft with us tonight. I tell you, I have. There's very few people in the world that have inspired me more than this guest today. And just so you know about our podcast, Permanent Beta means something to us. It means always learning, never done. And so one of the things that we hope that you take away from any episode that you are able to consume is the fact that we're trying to create value. As Einstein said, yes, I'm going to quote Einstein here, like, better to be a person who creates value than a person who tries to be successful. So we're trying to create as much value as we can on every single episode that we produce. So please know that about our intent and about the thing that gets us up in the morning is trying to create as much value as we can, try to learn as much as we can. And we're certainly going to do that today. And let me just say, and I'm going to try to keep this as concise as I possibly can, although that will be hard, because we're sitting with someone today who has been not only a mentor of mine, but someone who I've drawn a lot of inspiration and strength from. Louise Senft is very candidly the pioneer of modern mediation. And for all of you, all of our listeners who are principally small to mid-sized business and organizational leaders, you know over the course of the last several decades what that has meant to the business community, especially the small business community, what it means to have mediation as a viable alternative to litigation. It has changed the landscape of business. So that's one thing. That's only part of the equation. The other part of the equation, which is so much more impactful, has been Louise's work with her podcast, Blink of an Eye, but also with her new nonprofit, I See That. And we're going to hear directly from Louise in terms of what that means from an impact perspective for spinal cord injury and spinal cord trauma for the families and all that are impacted. I think you're going to learn something about this that you probably did not know in terms of what we should all be aware of in terms of spinal cord injury and trauma. So, Louise, oh my gosh, this is going to be like just a fun conversation. I am so blessed and grateful that you're here with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. This is a treat.
Yeah.
And I'm appreciative of what you just said. It's true. I am a mediator through and through, and I did have a very successful mediation business and practice until our lives changed in the blink of an eye. Yeah. And my life and all the lives of my children, my husband, our family members changed. And it was why I pivoted in taking everything that I knew to create Blink of an Eye and try to create value for other families and people who have experienced trauma. Yeah. And then that led to the creation of I See That, of the nonprofit.
Let's go right there. Let's go right there to I See That. Tell us a little bit more of the context and the story behind the real inspiration for and the need for what you've created, because it was Blink of an Eye first, right?
Yes.
And then I See That. That was the sequence, correct?
It actually was the Archer blog.
Okay.
The Archer blogs were first, and they were the writings that I was writing in real time every day to keep my family and friends updated when we were in the crisis in the hospital for months after our son, Archer, whom you know, dove into the Atlantic Ocean when we were on vacation and ran in, 6'3", big, beautiful athlete, and hit a sandbar and was instantly paralyzed from the neck on down. And in that moment, our lives changed, that blink of an eye moment. And what I realized in writing, just to keep people apprised, was how much I didn't know and how much the medical staff didn't know about spinal cord injury. But I did know about trauma and about trauma healing because of my practice as a transformative mediator and teacher and trainer. And so, graced by those years that had preceded this horrific event, we navigated our way. And so Blink of an Eye came about during COVID as a way to take those learnings after we had recalibrated as a family. It was in year 5. and to take that story, recreate it, but looking and talking with people behind the scenes who were really there with their points of view and their wisdom to
Powerful.
create a fuller story. And so then that's what then gave birth to not only a blink of an eye story, but trauma healing learnings. And then it's from those learnings when people said, what's next?
What's next?
What's next? And there is always, as you just said, always learning. There is always a next. It's living in the now and always knowing there's a next. It's very hopeful, actually, in that way. So blink of an eye led to I See That.
Yeah. And tell us about the mission for I See That. What
So
are
the
we trying
mission-
to accomplish here?
Oh my gosh. It's kind of like we were wanting to accomplish so many things,
Yeah.
but in the focused mission, it is that there's no other nonprofit or agency that is focused on what the military call the golden hour, the crisis hours when there has been a spinal cord injury.
Okay.
And we also know that hospitals across the United States do not have, by and large, spinal cord injury expertise. So the mission of I See That is to be a national resource for spinal cord injured families and medical teams to call in the moment of the telephone call that they get that there has been a spinal cord injury accident, to be able to triage with a group of spinal cord injury medical experts to give spinal cord injury opinions, reading films wherever they are, small towns across the United States or large cities, and to provide the resource, the spiritual, logistical, mental, emotional resource to the families for the first 30 days.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. And just so everybody understands, it's the letters IC and then THAT. I see that.
Yes.
.org.
ISeeThat.org.
Yeah.
That's right.
So how did this is your second run, if you will, at starting a national movement. How did your experience as the founder of a nationwide influencing training mediation practice, and by the way, an author as well, Being Relational is the name of the book, but how did that prepare you, even though it was unforeseen and certainly the most unexpected? Did you feel like you were equipped to be able to really pull this together in the manner in which you did and as quickly as you did?
Gosh, it is true. No one prepares for trauma.
Right.
And the awareness that I had did come from those years of mediating and training others that we were in trauma. Even when I was in shock, I knew that I was in shock. Having worked with others and, in business disputes or divorces and all kinds of entanglements that human beings find themselves in, you might not think that a mediator is working with people in shock, but indeed we are oftentimes when people are faced with, I might lose my children, I might lose my home, I might lose my business, I might lose my prominence in this community, and on it goes. I do feel that the years of being a transformative mediator and actually the 3 years that Billy and I were writing actually Being Relational, really gave us a grounding that we were able to call upon in those crisis moments and days and weeks.
Yeah. And you use the word trauma here, and I think we are now on a broader scale starting to understand what that word means. And specifically with respect to I See That and blink of an eye, there is layers and there's these ripples, if you will, right, of trauma.
Yes.
And I think that's where the real education is coming from I See That, which is we need to understand this better.
We
need
really
to understand
do.
the concentric circles of trauma.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
It's not just specific to the individual, right?
Yeah. It's really, it's quite illuminating for anyone who takes a look at his or her life, that none of us really can escape traumatic experiences, whether we had them when we were young children or whether in middle school and high school or college or as adults, and all of the events in the current life that we all live in the larger world and how that impacts us. But we also have, as it relates to those circles, we have intergenerational trauma that we carry. We have collective trauma that we carry. And we have trauma from our ancestors that we carry that we might not have even been aware of, but it's in our DNA. And the beauty of understanding trauma is to begin to befriend it, to know that we can heal trauma. We can heal all trauma that usually resides in our bodies.
That's incredibly uplifting. And there's a lot of people that are going to be sort of really gravitating to that statement that you just made, especially as we see from the business owner or the leadership perspective, where there is a lot of people, as you just illuminated, there's a lot of people walking around with trauma that they don't even know exists within them.
That's right.
And so one of the things I would love to understand better is that not only in your experience with Archer and with I See That, but also delving into your experience as a transformational mediator, what are some of the things you've learned that, and I know this is a pretty heavy question, you could go a lot of different ways with it, but what are some of the things, not all of them, but some of those things that you've learned about trauma that we may be able to take with us, out of just understanding at a superficial level, even, that we would be better served by?
Well, when people choose to come to our trainings, we have nationally certified trainings, whether they're executives or they're parents or both, or they're running committees or they're running large businesses or departments in hospitals. We have the gamut of people who come to our trainings. One of the key learnings to be a transformative mediator is that it's so important to develop one's own self-awareness of what we call our transactional tendencies that get in the way of other people's ability to be relational and to be empowered. So, for instance, for a mediator, as soon as she might be aware that if I could just get these people to agree, or if I could just get him to see it her way, or if I could just get them to give up, those are all transactional tendencies to get a deal done that do not foster the extraordinary experience, if you will, that can be had through conflict with finding what is important for you, with saying what is important for you, with discerning what doesn't matter anymore or what you will choose to give up or to say, I can live without, or I could never live without that. Those moments come from the mediator having honed her discipline, her self-discipline with self-awareness.
Yeah.
And trauma follows that same pathway. That when you see trauma typically will show up in one of two very large categories of responses. One is just, it's too big, too exaggerated, too hyper-reactive, a lot of personal reactivity when people be like, where did that come from? Or, oh my gosh, that was a throwback, or dang, I scratched a wound I didn't know existed. And the truth is, yes, you probably did. The other part and the other side of that trauma coin is being really numbed out. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I'm living kind of in a fog. I don't even, both of them, though, have the tendency of that really wasn't me. And whether it's a numbing out or a hyper reactivity, they're both coming from the experience that the brain tried to protect the little girl or the little boy or the young man or the young woman or the older woman or the older man to do the best it could when the body was in overwhelm, when the central nervous system was in overwhelm.
Yeah.
So to befriend that numbing or that hyperactivity without fighting it,
Yeah.
but to have the awareness about it opens up a whole pathway
This
to
is
trauma
like
healing.
fundamental.
Yeah.
This goes beyond even the important elements in dealing with trauma. This goes into every element of life. This is like foundational. We should all have some time to understand the way the brain reacts and what it's doing to protect itself and
It's
and the rest of
really
the body. It's fascinating.
it's fascinating, and it's something where with that intellectual understanding,
Yeah.
if you will, we can become more compassionate.
Exactly. It just makes you better.
Yeah,
It makes
us
you a better
better.
person.
It does.
Makes you a
us
better leader,
people.
of course.
Yes.
But just a better human being.
And I really now, this year, for
Yeah.
instance, I can't imagine, even in my leadership courses that we've offered, not having this threaded through completely from the time of understanding ourselves from, our birth process into this world,
Yeah.
all the way through the different chapters of our lives for how we show up right now, right?
Yeah.
Talking to each other
Absolutely.
as colleagues, as friends.
We would be so well served if we knew more about that and connected to it, understood it,
Yes.
understood how it shaped us, and then understood how it affects our relationships, how it affects our own version of success or being
Yes.
the best version of ourselves.
Well, that's
I mean,
right.
that's a
Oh my
huge
goodness.
deal.
Think about our versions of success,
Yeah,
right? I've just
sure.
got to take everything I have and
Yeah.
can and stomp on people or,
Yeah.
take it all because there's probably, an underlying wound there
Yeah.
for someone who wasn't recognized, who saw somebody else stomped on.
Right.
We can go into analyzing, but the beauty of trauma and trauma healing, the beauty of trauma is that it does afford an opportunity for greater personal development, and trauma healing in that there isn't any one way to do it.
Right.
And we don't have to analyze each other.
Yeah.
We can say, that might be from that or might be from this myself. And here we are.
And here we are
on the
Isn't
same
that
planet.
Beautiful? Oh my God. If only, if only that reasonableness and civility existed, right? That we could have those kind of conversations, right?
Yeah.
We are all in process.
We are all in process.
Right? It speaks really to the whole concept of permanent beta, right? We're never done. We're always learning. We're always in process. And if I can just assume positive intent,
Yes.
right?
Positive
because
intent
you're
will
trying to
take
bring the
us
best
so
of you,
far. Yeah.
and I'm trying to bring the best of me, and that's going to make me a better leader. It's going to make me much more empathetic, self-aware, a better manager of people, right?
Completely.
Completely.
I found as a leader managing others to say, and in the older days, I would say it to myself. And in the more mature days, I will have the courage to say it out loud. Something like, if I didn't like the way I managed, to say, I'd like a redo with what just happened. That's probably related to something I still need to take a look at.
That's so good.
I'm
going to that's a keeper for me.
Yeah.
That's a keeper. I'm going to use it. I'll give attribution. Don't worry. But that's a keeper for me. I love that. Yeah.
And it's really true when people are older or younger, it's a particular modeling.
Right.
And a way that we can be more authentic with
Isn't that
each
true,
other.
though? Don't you see that and you've worked with so many leaders over the years? It's like, isn't that so, it's so affirming. It feels so right when you're around a leader who is willing to say things like, I might not be right about this, or help me understand, or, I'm just kicking this idea around, but, I haven't really thought it out yet. Or, and that's okay.
Think,
it's the ultimate connector.
Yeah.
And that kind of vulnerability and humility and willingness to learn propels that person, propels their interpersonal connection, and propels the organization, right? I mean,
I think your permanent beta is right on it with an aspect of, as we'd say in the relational context, being strong enough to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right? You can
Take
be
strength.
vulnerable and still be a great leader. In
No
fact,
question.
you might be the best leader because you can be.
That's right. So it is Women's History Month, and so I want to not only celebrate great leadership, but great women leadership. And so you have modeled that for me,
No.
for sure. It has been absolutely impactful in the way that I lead and manage, being able to work with you over the last several years. And so, as you have founded your mediation practice, as well as I see that, so for profit and not for profit, what can you share about some of the inherent challenges and opportunities that come about by virtue of being a female founder?
Oh my goodness, there were a lot of questions embedded in that.
There are. How about that one? Here you
Yeah,
go.
wow.
There you go.
Well, I'll tell you what, the first thing that came to my mind
Yeah.
when you were asking it was that in founding a for-profit, Baltimore Mediation, and now the not-for-profit, I see that, and with blink of an eye, one of the key pieces has been that they have been grounded in value. And what is the value? What do we stand for?
Yeah.
And everybody wants a business plan really quickly,
Yeah.
right? And I love business plans myself,
Sure.
and I love growth, and I love to see strategy, and I'm all in on all that. But we can go really cattywampus and sideways pretty quickly if we are not clear about what is the basic proposition, which is even deeper than the mission, because it's this value-based proposition. What do we stand for?
Yeah.
And for us, everything has always been about self and other. And what a friend of mine, who's an amazing neuroscientist, calls the MWE, like the you and I, the we and the me and the you, the
Okay.
MWE.
Yeah. All right.
And how it is that we can create well-being. So with Baltimore Mediation, the idea was to create greater well-being out of the conflict experience. And with I See That, it's to create an extraordinary experience out of the crisis experience. So they're still grounded in the same value. I would say as a woman, in starting both of these enterprises, there's a 30-year time difference, which matters immensely. So I was a much younger woman when I started Baltimore Mediation. And yes, there were the days. I mean, you're a lawyer by background, Chris, as am I. There were many, many days when I was the only woman in the boardroom. That actually never bothered me, but it did not. I was aware and not oblivious to the times when I would speak and was not heard, but my comment or what I thought was a decent enough idea would then be attributed. That's very real. I mean, we could say, oh my gosh, that was just in the 1970s and 1980s, but it was real. And that shaped the kind of female leader I became, because it wasn't, I didn't think, and I just wasn't cut out to be someone who would be bitter by that. It was just more like a challenge. Like, okay, so when it came around in meetings like that, or I might have said something and 20 minutes later it was attributed to, Joe, I would then say later, that idea that you all had said was Joe's, I think I had said blah, 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 and I would just repeat it again,
Right.
Just to get on the record.
Get on the record.
And that was all. No one had to, I wasn't asking for
Right.
apologies or anything like that, just to get it on the record. And I think that the learnings from that and many, many others as a woman are really to bring the feminine voice in to, and I would now say the feminine voice for men and for women, because as we look around and are very interested in having all voices, right? Voices of color, voices of youth, voices of older, wiser. But as we think about bringing in voices, and that's what Baltimore Mediation has been about at the mediation table, all voices, that is still what is the running undercurrent, and call it a feminine value I see that.
Yeah.
So we're not, for instance, just for spinal cord injured families,
Right.
like be patient centered, you might say, in the hospitals. Well, and I would say that's fantastic.
Right.
But what about being family centered and being medical team centered as
Right.
well? Sort of the three prongs of the stool
Yeah.
in the medical world, right? The patient, the family, and the medical team.
Yeah.
They all matter. So I think it's really that feminine value
Yeah.
of being interested in other people's stories, being interested in the emotional quality of what it is that matters for people and what causes people's Velcro to connect to other people's
I
Velcro.
like that.
You know,
Yeah.
that's very much we might say feminine value, and it's one that I would be happy to have usurped by other
Yeah.
men
Yeah.
and boys as well. I don't want to just keep that all to myself.
Yeah.
But I believe that is very much what has transpired for me.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate that perspective, and I think what that leads me to in my critical thinking brain is this idea of leadership effectiveness. Have you seen anything translate directly, like one to one, in terms of for profit to not for profit?
Oh, without question.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, for one thing, a leader is a leader.
yeah,
And I think just for Women's History Month, I think it is quite remarkable that when women do lead, that we can lead with great strength. People are expecting us to, I think, be soft.
yeah. No, I haven't. Yeah,
And just like go along to get along. And in many ways, I've tried to cultivate that in myself because it's not been a part of my DNA.
Right. Yeah.
It's been more like kind of call it like you see it,
Yeah.
and then try and smooth over the ruffled feathers. And as I've gotten older, it's been trying to anticipate what would be difficult and begin to smooth before it happens so that we can have a softer landing. But the translation of what has really worked in a for-profit and what so far works in a not-for-profit is you build your team
Yeah.
and you look for the best. You look for the brightest. You look for the most altruistic, right? Because in business, you want people who can be team players. You want people who are going to say, we're taking one for the department and for the team.
Yes.
You don't want to have someone who like owns the whole, project or whatever it is. I mean, one of the greatest, I would say, pitfalls in running any business would be to say, oh, that's Barry's project, right? That's Chris's department. No.
Yeah.
A mistake number
Yes.
one. While we want to cultivate leadership and ownership, we want to say that is this department, and it is run beautifully by Chris,
Yeah.
amazingly by Barry, and unbelievably by Sally Joe. So that translates into creating a board, and for us, a board of trustees.
Yeah.
No slackers.
Yeah.
And also, not everyone is the same.
Right.
So you look for the talent set of the kind of enterprise that you wish to build.
Yeah.
And that has absolutely been true for us with I See That and Blink of an Eye.
I'm so glad that you went there with that. And I know that from experience in working with you, that has been true for both of your organizations that you've led. And I just want everybody to understand that so clearly is maybe the key to that thriving culture, that higher performance culture, is who you're bringing onto the team.
Absolutely.
Like, surround yourself with people who are amazing, who are better than you in many respects. This whole concept of decentralized command, right? You want to bring people on that are complementary to your weaknesses, people who are going to make you better, challenge you, hold you accountable, even as the leader. Imagine that. Like, it's a good thing. That's what we're really.
Chris, I'm really thinking that a key piece for us, and it's come straight out of our mediation work when we are working with other groups and enterprises, has been to work with executives on their own guidelines. How do you want this? How do you want the next 10 months of working together, moving this new change forward? How do you want to work well together? What will it take? And so we've done that over the years at Baltimore Mediation, and we have done it and are doing it now with our board of trustees. Beginning with understanding a little bit about each other personally,
Yes.
taking the time at the outset of meetings to ground ourselves, to give a positive intention for what a meeting is all about, and to make room for dissension and for new ideas, and that we don't have to respond to them all. We can distill them, take them in, while we're really thinking more clearly about this.
It should be a business imperative. I mean, you're describing psychological safety, right?
Absolutely.
And it's
psychological safety.
It's an imperative. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have.
Yeah.
Right.
It also, I think, teaches a great deal of humility,
Yeah.
including for the leader, that there are other ideas out there that are as good and perhaps and likely better than yours. And there's no question about it that the greatest ideas and roadmap emerges when you have the different points of view articulated.
Right.
And you can't do that if there isn't safety.
No, exactly. No, and we see that time and time again. And I would tell you, I could point to the organizations that are thriving or not, almost based on that principle alone, if that exists.
Yes.
Right.
And I think people get frightened by that because if they open it up to all these anybody's comments or ideas, there might be criticism, there might be dissension. But if you've done the work on the front end, a criticism is not really allowed. What is allowed is to say, you know what, I'm thinking about this and I'm not sure it's a good idea for A, B, and C, which is very different from, I don't know why they da-da-da-da-da.
The framing.
Yeah, it's all in the framing.
It's all in the framing.
Yeah.
And part of that is, that can be a part of your cultural principles of success, really.
Precisely.
And that requires a little bit of training, a little bit of patience. But a
lot of bit of training and a lot of bit of patience.
And for sure, and modeling the way.
Yeah.
And that has to come from leadership.
It
You've
does
got
have
to
to come
be
from
able to
leadership.
model the way. And even if you're a 600-person organization, you can do that.
You can. You absolutely can. And part of that modeling is to know, too, I think, for really strong leaders that you can make mistakes.
Yes.
You can, when you're not certain, turn it over to your team. But I do think that in the believing in others, there can come a point where there can also be too much delegation.
Agreed.
And then the left hand doesn't really know what the right hand is doing.
Right. And again, we're not talking about a panacea here. We're talking about a little bit of art and a little bit of science.
A little bit of art and a little bit of science and a lot of bit of love and a little bit of compassion.
Right on. One more question for you, okay, before we wrap up. And there is unquestionably a new work contract, right, that exists.
Are you speaking of because of COVID?
Well, that certainly has accelerated this, right? And whether it's not-for-profit or for-profit, it's immaterial. It's like this idea that there needs to be flexibility. There needs to be an awareness of what many have called ESG, right, which is environmental, social, and governance. And there needs to be some level of digital transformation, right? There needs to be some level of technology anchored, or what's next. You get to be thinking that way, right? Yeah. And have you seen that come into play where we are really leading in a different way today than even we were 3 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So many more considerations to put to the forefront. Maybe we would argue they should have been there all along, and of course we would. But we're having to really work those into the normal course, as we should.
I don't even know where to begin on that. I would say from my vantage point that where ESG and flexibility converge is at the point of accountability, and that there can be amazing out-of-the-box ways of doing business, including across the planet and other time zones, with people we've never even met and in some ways even seen, depending on how the business is transacted within the company, how the person is hired and what they're doing. That's very exciting, incredibly diverse. But at the end of the day, human beings still need to feel like they belong.
Yeah.
And that leadership, cutting edge, is, I think, yet to emerge. What I do think it is emerging, again, starting at the top, but also at all levels of an organization, and maybe there won't necessarily be levels. It's in this quality of the experience of a full life. I think we used to call it work-life balance.
Right.
And what we've seen through COVID is that because of time zones and with people with whom we're working now that we didn't before, and because there really isn't a stop time of the day of working. There's no longer a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 6 or different shifts. They are almost becoming obsolete. That we will need to reclaim and redefine our boundaries for what it is that is important for how it is that we live a full life. And I believe that many leaders are finding how amazing and nurturing and sustaining it has been to spend more time in their homes, with their families, with their children, their grandchildren, and realizing that that is not something that is just for the leadership, but is something to be welcomed and encouraged for all in the workplace. And so we come back to accountability because in order to have that, we still must have productivity and things that need to get done. And so I think that's the new way of figuring that out as a leader.
That's really well said. And thank you for saying the part about accountability. Accountability is not a bad word.
No.
Right? It's been hijacked.
No, right.
Let's bring it back to where it's in its rightful
it's like
place.
Discipline, self-discipline.
Exactly. It's something we really should be embracing more. And so with that, I think the underscoring of everything that you just shared is that, gosh, leadership matters.
It does.
And there's still such a dearth of good leadership, unfortunately, and we just need to continue to find it and cultivate it.
Opportunities
Right on.
to learn ourselves and cultivate it in others. And you know, I might say, just because I'm crazy about what we're doing right now with trying to help other people with blink of an eye, I think there's a leadership that emerges for any human being to become more aware of his or her own story and where the wounds are and how to take care of them. We have loads of trauma healing learning, tips and practices and
it's a rich
experts.
content.
It's a rich content to realize that and to weave it into daily practice.
Absolutely.
Whether you're managing the small company, the mid-sized company, which for many can still be a pretty big-sized company.
No question.
The nonprofit, and those in your home.
Yeah. You can really love someone once you know their story.
You really can love someone once you know their story.
So good. We are so grateful for you, Louise. You are a change maker. We want to just encourage everybody to understand more about what Louise is doing. So please check out ISeeThat.org. Please check out Blink of an Eye podcast. Please check out Being Relational. You're a gift. You are a gift. I'm so grateful to be in your orbit. And we thank everybody. Permanent Beta Podcast. Always learning.
Permanent beta.
Always learning.
Always learning.
Never done.
Never done. Never finished, as my mother would
there
say.
We go. There
Turkeys
we go.
are done. People get finished.
Well, there we go. We may need to change it up. Louise Senft, thank you so much.
Thank you,
and thank you
Christia.
all.